Okay, so today we're starting with chapter 10, which looks at sleep disturbances and possible treatments for those sleep disturbances. So basically, the first spread that we're looking at today looks at sleep deprivation. So we all know what sleep deprivation is. And in this spread, what we're going to do is we're looking at what sleep deprivation means. And we're also looking at the three types of effects that it can have on your functioning. Okay, so if we look at sleep deprivation, there are two types of sleep deprivation. Okay, you've got partial sleep deprivation. Sorry, you've got partial sleep deprivation and you've got total sleep deprivation. In this spread and in this chapter, we're kind of focusing on partial sleep deprivation, which is sleep deprivation where you're losing sleep, but it's in parts, it's in like fragments. Okay, you're not completely going without sleep, you're simply losing sleep. Okay, total sleep deprivation is when you say, I'm going to stay awake for 20 hours straight. I'm going to pull an all-nighter for 20 hours and not go to sleep at all. That's total sleep deprivation. Okay, you're totally depriving yourself of sleep completely. Partial is when, for example, you normally sleep for, let's say, 9 hours. Okay, but for the past few days, you've been sleeping for about, let's say, like 5 hours. So each night you're kind of losing 4 hours or so of sleep. Okay, that's partial sleep deprivation. It's when you get less sleep than what you normally require, but you're still sleeping. Okay, you're still getting those Z's, you're still sleeping, but it's less than what you would normally sleep. Okay, so remember, guys, that when we're looking at the effects of sleep deprivation in this chapter, we're not really focused too much on total sleep deprivation, but we are focused more on partial sleep deprivation. Reason being, this is the main common type of sleep deprivation that most people experience in our society. Okay, so the definition of sleep deprivation is really simple. It just simply means going without sleep, okay, or going without the sleep that you usually have. So that's basically what sleep deprivation means. There are three effects of partial sleep deprivation. Oh, why is it changing like that? Okay, so there are three effects of partial sleep deprivation. Those are affective, behavioral, and cognitive. So affective effects of partial sleep deprivation are to do with your emotions. Okay, they're to do with your moods. They're to do with your feelings. Okay, emotions, moods, and feelings. The behavioral are to do with how being sleep deprived affects your physical actions or your physical functioning or your physical ability to do things. Physical action. For example, when people are sleep deprived, they tend to have slower reflexes, okay? If you throw something at them, they might not dodge it as quickly as they would have if they were not sleep deprived. And cognitive, as we know, refers to anything to do with the brain in terms of things like processes like thinking, reasoning, being able to make decisions, all that kind of stuff. Decision making, all that kind of stuff, okay? So we are going to look at an experiment in the next spread that talks about what happens when you are partially sleep deprived and how it affects your ability to function from a cognitive point of view. Okay, how it affects all those processes of thinking, decision making, planning, all that stuff. Okay, so we call this the ABC effects of partial sleep deprivation simply because A, B, and C. Okay, that's what the three effects stand for. So that's basically the effects of partial sleep deprivation. So we're going to look at them in a bit more detail now. The first one is called affective effects. And look, if you've ever been partially sleep deprived, and I think with this whole isolation and with this whole lockdown and stuff, I think a lot of people these days are having issues with their normal sleep patterns. I, for sure, am one of those people. So, you know, in the recent few days, like I've been probably having 3 to 4 hours less sleep than usual. So I am partially sleep deprived at this point. I'm a good case study for our spread here. Okay, so affective affects refer to your changes. Like I said before in the previous slide, the key words we're looking at here are changes in your emotion, changes in your mood, or changes in your ability to even control those emotions. What we mean by control is that when you're not having enough sleep and someone annoys you, even the slightest bit, you might show an intensified emotional display, which is just a way of saying a really intense emotion. Emotional expression there. So you might snap at them, okay, over the tiniest thing, okay, or you might start crying over the tiniest thing. You also have reduced empathy, which means you have a reduced understanding of how other people feel. So you might actually say something that you know is going to hurt someone else without considering that thing could be harmful for that person, or that you are doing the wrong thing there. Okay, so that's what affective effects means. It's to do with emotions. So always remember the picture of the lady kind of crying in front of this person, okay, because she is sleep deprived. Okay, and she says, "Good day, sob, I only have tired days." So remember that comic? That's related to affective effects. Okay, affective effects are changes in your emotions. Okay, so you can use the memory tip me, okay, to remember that affective is to do with mood, effects on your mood, and effects on your emotion there. So that's the affective. I say affective effects because when I say affective effects, it sounds a bit funny. A good question. So when you wake up a few times at night while asleep, losing 2 hours altogether, is that partially? Yeah, that's still partially sleep deprived. And that actually gets worse, for example, if it happens over a few nights. So if it happens over a few nights, and altogether you're losing, let's say, 2 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Tuesday, 2 hours on Wednesday, you've actually lost 6 hours. And look, the way that sleep works is that although we can accumulate what we call a sleep debt, just like you accumulate financial debt, we can accumulate a sleep debt where, like, for example, in total this week over the 5 days or 7 days, I've lost about 6 hours of sleep, let's say, okay, which is probably true. That is, again, partial sleep deprivation. That doesn't mean I have to sleep 6 hours to get that back, okay, but when I sleep the next time and I'm allowed to sleep uninterrupted and I don't have to wake up for wake up for school, or you guys don't have to wake up for, let's say, an early morning class, you will actually sleep longer. Okay. The main reason a lot of us are sleep deprived is because of situational factors like having to wake up early for school, or going to sleep late the previous night, or looking at your phone too much, because we know that light has an effect on our melatonin release. So a lot of these things can affect your sleep-wake cycle there, okay, which can make you partially sleep deprived. So the second factor that we're looking at is behavioral effects, okay? So your behavioral effects are to do with changes in your actions, okay, or the way that you function, and this is from a physical point of view. Okay, when we talk about changes and which ones are obvious and which ones are not, behavioral changes are probably the most obvious, okay? Simply because you can see that a person is not their actual self, that they're behaving differently, okay? And you might ask them, what's up, what's wrong? Okay, you seem to be quite sleepy, okay? If you're sleep deprived, you might do something that's obviously incorrect, but you don't realize it until someone points it out for you. Like that time I was trying to put the VGA cable into the HDMI slot, and I was like, why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm doing the wrong thing there. Okay, so that's basically behavioral effects. Okay, it might be, and you might feel really dumb for making that mistake, but it's not actually your fault, because your behavior is affected by your cognition. So behavioral effects and cognitive effects go in line. When you're when you've got less sleep, you're more likely to make mistakes because you've got deficits, because you've got a decline there in your cognitive functioning. You're not as on point with your cognitive functioning as you normally are. Okay. In terms of your sleep behaviors that are affected, you experience a lot of sleep inertia, which means that you keep falling in and out of sleep. And when you wake up, you feel very groggy and disgusting. Or a microsleep. Microsleeps, we don't look at these in depth in the study design, but microsleeps have this basic idea that when you haven't slept for a long time, okay, you start to go to sleep very quickly, or you start to feel very drowsy and your eyes kind of shut themselves when you're in a situation where you're not an active participant for something, okay? The most common example of this is those of you who are sleep deprived. You come to school and then you fall asleep in class. Okay, you can't really help that. You don't want to fall asleep in class, but you can't really help that because you just are so sleep deprived. And when I'm not getting you to, for example, do something actively in class, when I'm explaining the content, I see this happen the most, that when I'm explaining the content, you guys are not keeping yourselves busy with something. And so you're more likely to fall into your micro sleep at that point. Remember, micro sleeps are not real sleep. They're called micro because they're a really tiny bit of sleep where you just kind of like fall forward and your eyes close. But maybe after a few seconds, you quickly, you kind of like jolt back up and you're like, oh my God, like I was about to fall asleep. But some of you literally like fall asleep in class, which is a different story. That's not a micro sleep. Okay. You don't have to define it exactly, but just define it with the, see the words I'm underlining there? Those are the key words there. So like behavioral effects could refer to changes in your actions, okay? That's enough. Or changes in your physical functions after going without sleep, that's enough, okay? So it doesn't have to be exact or word to word there. Other behavioral effects that we can talk about are things like decreased participation in school. Okay, that means you don't, for example, answer as many questions in class, for example, or being absent from school altogether. Okay. Now, sleep deprivation doesn't only affect students, it even affects adults as well, okay, or people who are in full-time work. You might not go to work because you're sleep deprived, okay? If you've got a child who normally has ADHD or behavioral difficulties or behavioral issues, those children who don't sleep actually are more become more agitated, okay? And they're more likely to show issues in behavior compared to when they've had normal sleep. And as I said before, your reflexes are also affected with your behavioral effects. So you've got reduced motor and hand-eye coordination, okay? And this actually goes on to affect your ability to do things, for example, to play sports, okay? You might not be at the top of your game if you're sleep deprived. And this is why all our people who participate in the Olympics, they obviously need to have proper sleep, because not having proper sleep can really throw them off, okay? Another example of reduced motor hand-eye coordination is like driving a car, okay? Might not seem like a physical activity there, but your ability to drive a car safely is actually affected by not having enough sleep. And we call this an effect on psychomotor performance, okay? Because driving is not just a motor performance, not just something that requires movement, but it's actually something that requires your cognition as well, okay? And we're going to learn more about an experiment that talks about the effect of partial sleep deprivation on psychomotor performance in spread 10B, okay? So that's just connecting the topics there. Okay, so, oh, by the way, guys, from each of these slides, there's a lot of examples, I know. Just learn 2 examples, okay? So 2 examples for affective, and then again, the same 2 examples for behavioral. Just learn whichever ones are easiest for you to remember. We're not going to ask you to define a specific one there. Just learn any 2 that are easiest for you to remember, okay? All right, so moving on to our last effect, which is the cognitive effects of partial sleep deprivation. As I said before, your cognitive effects are focused on how you think, focused on how you learn, focused on how you reason, or how you process information. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now, there have been previous studies that have been done to show how your cognitive functioning is affected by sleep deprivation. Okay, so there's more on this in the next spread, which we're going to learn about. Now, some specific cognitive effects that come out of you being sleep deprived include decreased judgment. Okay, so you're more likely as a result of that decreased judgment to make poor decisions. Okay, decisions that are not properly thought out, in other words, or decisions that seem a bit irrational, even like you haven't really thought about it, or you haven't really reasoned about how correct or how logical that is. You'll have impaired short-term memory. Okay, you'll have issues with your problem solving. Okay, this is why you shouldn't be pulling all-nighters the night before the SAC, because you could have a really easy question in front of you and you might make a very silly mistake on that question, okay? Because your cognitive functioning is affected when you're sleep deprived. And you might think in illogical or irrational ways, okay? And generally when we're sleep deprived, we tend to focus a lot more on the negatives rather than the positives, which is another issue with being sleep deprived, okay? And you can see this article here that says sleep deprived interns make serious mistakes, okay? So I think it says doctors in training made 1/3 more serious mistakes during typically long shifts than they did during short 16-hour shifts. And the idea there is that obviously the interns that are doing the night shift are probably more sleep deprived than the ones who are doing the day shifts there, okay? So cognitive effects, again, just learn any 2. Okay, it's just to do with the way we think, reason, behave, and process information, okay, and memorize things. Okay, so that's cognitive effects. You can use this memory to, if you want, to remember some of them. Again, it's not just about knowing the word like irritability, but it's about knowing what category that comes under. So I need to know irritability is an affective partial sleep deprivation, because when you're irritable, you're annoyed. It's a feeling, okay? So that's why it comes under the emotional component of the affective effects, okay? If you've got slowed reaction time is actually behavioral, okay, because I can see if I throw something at someone and they don't react fast, I can judge that. That's easy for me to observe. Okay, so just learn again any two from each. If you want, you can use this memory tip to remember. Otherwise, you can just make your own memory tip for those that you learn. And this is just a slide that summarizes the effects of partial sleep deprivation. Okay, looking at, again, each one just in one table. As I say, I always put these tables in from the books because I know that some of you, maybe before the SAC, don't want to read through the actual slides. You just want one slide that summarizes everything. This is one slide that summarizes everything. I've also distinguished here, guys, I've put a little blue box there with the definitions of what psychological effects are and what physiological effects are. I'm pretty sure this should be common knowledge by now, but psychological, remember, always refers to our mental processes, okay? It refers to our emotions and mental processes, whereas the physiological is more to do with the body. So you can see the physiological symptoms here are all under behavioral, because remember, behavioral was the one where we talked about it mostly being physical or relating to the physical actions or physical functions. Okay, and you can see most of these refer to the body: lack of energy, hand tremors, which is where your hand shakes involuntarily, headaches, muscle aches. These are all to do with the body. Okay, so that's the basic idea now. Now, headaches is a problematic one because headaches can also be classed as cognitive, for the simple idea that headaches do affect your cognitive function. You can't think as well when you're having a headache, okay? If you don't want to get confused, just don't learn headaches. Learn another one that's more clear, okay? That's the basic idea there. All right, so let me just get rid of these scribbles. Okay, so moving on to the next spread, we're looking at the experiment that I was telling you guys about. And this spread is literally just dedicated to only looking at that experiment. Now, in Unit 4, we don't really do a lot of experiments, or we don't really study a lot of experiments. In Unit 3, you'll remember we learned about many different ones, like Pavlov's classical conditioning experiment with the dogs, the Bobo doll experiment by Bandura. We talked about the little Albert experiment that was done by Watson as well. Okay, so we did so many experiments in Unit 3, but we're not doing as many in Unit 4. Okay, this is probably, I think, the only experiment we do. Yeah, it's the only experiment we do in Unit 4, if I remember correctly. So I've summarized it here for you guys, and I've just summarized the results. You don't need to know everything about the method and how they conducted it. It's more about knowing the main aim and then the main results that came out of that. So just to introduce you guys to what this study was, it was called the Dawson and Reid 1997 experiment. Now, who were Dawson and Reid? They were two psychologists from Australia. Okay, so they conducted this experiment where they wanted to investigate, can being tired, in very, very simple words, can being tired be like being drunk? Okay. Can it be that someone is so tired that they start to show the cognitive impairments or the cognitive deficits that are similar to someone who's actually under the influence of alcohol, or who is either at or over the legal limit for alcohol consumption there? Okay, so that was the main aim. You need to know this. It doesn't have to be word to word, but you need to know that this is the main aim of their study, to investigate whether being significantly sleep deprived, and that's through being awake and not going to sleep, could affect a person's cognitive functioning to a similar extent that being at or over the legal limit drunk did. Now, the legal limit in Australia for being drunk is 0.05. That's the number they look at when people get breath tested. Okay, if you're at 0.05, you're at the legal limit there. But if you're over 0.05, then obviously you are over the legal limit. So if I'm at 0.08, I'm going to get questioned there, obviously, as to why I'm driving under the influence and why I'm driving over the legal limit there. Okay, so that's the basic idea, guys. Okay, so in this spread, what we're doing is we're analyzing the results of this experiment. And more importantly, we're trying to link back the findings back to consciousness, which is the topic, as well as back to the cognitive effects of partial sleep deprivation. That's our C of the ABC. That the participants in this study experienced. I say that this diagram is simplified and slightly dramatic for the simple reason that it's a really good diagram or picture, but it kind of says that 17 hours equals to alcohol, like being awake for 17 hours is like equal to or the same as drinking 2 alcoholic beverages. I find that a little bit problematic. I would rather use a symbol like this. You know, the symbol in maths that means not equal to, but approximately or similar to. I would rather use that squiggly equal sign rather than the actual equal sign. Okay, we know that someone who's awake for 17 hours is going to have effects with thinking and reasoning, but probably not exactly or identically to someone who's drunk 2 alcoholic beverages, okay? For the simple reason that alcohol is a depressant drug. It does affect your functioning and it does intoxicate you more so than just staying awake, okay? So that's the reason I say that it's simplified and it's slightly dramatic, okay? I don't like to use the word equal to or equivalent to. I prefer you guys use the word similar to or resembles. Those are good words to use there. Okay, lack of sleep affects a lot of our functions: sleep, speech, motor functioning, our levels of aggression, which is affective, impulsiveness, memory, decision making, problem solving. Okay, if we were to categorize these now, decision making and problem solving, what do you guys think they would be? A, B, or C? You can put it in the chat box. C, excellent, good work. So C, memory would also be C as a result of that. Impulsiveness is to do with how rash you are. Impulsiveness can also be C, but it can also be E as well, okay? Depending on the situation. If the situation says, oh, this person is impulsive and they're getting frustrated very quickly when they don't get their way, you can link it more to emotional, okay? Aggression will obviously be, sorry, not E, should be A. I'm saying E for emotion, but it should be A for affective. Levels of aggression is also A. Motor functioning. What do you guys think motor functioning would be? A, B, or C? Forgetfulness would also be C. Okay, motor functioning would be B. Excellent, good work, because it's to do with physical actions. And speech can also be B or C. Look, it depends, okay? It will mostly be B though, because speech difficulties are to do with the way your jaw kind of moves itself. So I would link it more to B there, okay? Especially if someone is slurring their speech or someone is not speaking the way that they should, there's a lack of control there in their jaw movements that's causing them to do that. Okay, so that's the basic idea there. So that's basically looking at the Dawson and Reid study. Okay. Now I'm going to come back to this diagram. This is the basic setup of how the study was conducted. Okay, so you can see that Dawson and Reid conducted a study where patients had to be sleep deprived for 1 full night. And this was called sustained wakefulness. Okay, this 1 full night was 17 hours. Okay, that was in the one condition. And in another condition, they were then asked to be sleep deprived for a full day, which was 24 hours. Okay. When the patients were then, or the participants were then asked to complete a cognitive task. So cognitive task could mean they were asked to complete a number of tasks, okay, probably like a quiz. And at some point they were also asked to like drive a car through like an obstacle course. Okay, and what Dawson and Reid found was when the participants were sleep deprived, they performed very poorly. Okay, very poorly means that they performed to such an extent and they made so many errors that their cognitive performance actually resembled or looked similar to if someone with a BAC or blood alcohol concentration level of 0.05 had done that same task. Okay, that's why we say being sleep deprived for 17 hours can make you do errors or can make you commit errors on a cognitive task that make your cognitive performance similar to or resemble someone who has a 0.05 blood alcohol concentration level. Okay. That's the first main formula that we need to know, or the main kind of number we need to know from this study. Okay. Now, these same participants were then used in the alcohol condition of the study. So remember, the same participants were getting to first be sleep deprived, and then we're getting the same participants to drink the alcohol and reach that 0.05 BAC. Okay. Now, when we use the same participants for the experimental and control group, guys, what's the name of that design when the same participant is being used twice? Put it in the chat box if you remember. I know it's research methods, but just to
repeated measure design.
Repeated measures, excellent, good work. So that obviously in Dawson and Reid study, we were using a repeated measures design there, okay? Because the same participant would first be sleep deprived for a few nights and then do the cognitive task. And then the same participant would come the next week and drink the alcohol until they reached the 0.05 BAC. And then they would again do the task again. Now, in the alcohol condition, there were actually 2 conditions. First of all, the participant drank enough alcohol to reach a 0.05 BAC. And then Dawson and Reid were like, let's double it. So they were like, we want you to now drink alcohol to reach twice the legal limit, which is drink enough alcohol until your blood alcohol concentration level reaches 0.10 or 0.1% there, okay? And so then what Dawson and Reid did was they made them be awake for 24 hours. And that's the correlation that they found, okay? That when you're awake for 17 hours, your concentration, your cognitive ability, your cognitive performance is similar to someone who's been drinking enough alcohol to reach the legal limit. So 17 hours resembles a person with 0.05 BAC. On the other hand, if you're awake for 24 hours, what they found was these people had very similar performance to someone who had reached twice the legal limit in terms of alcohol consumption, who was at a 0.1 BAC. So those are the two numbers we need to memorize, okay? And I've put them on the next slide as well. These are the only two numbers from the study that you need to learn. That 17 hours sleep deprivation corresponds to cognitive performance that resembles someone who is at the legal limit for alcohol consumption. 24 hours of sleep deprivation, which is one complete full kind of night or full day there, is resembling your cognitive performance to be similar to someone who's twice the legal limit, okay? Twice the legal limit there. So you guys can see here that what we saw in the previous slide with the whole idea that, you know, being sleep deprived is like being drunk, it's not completely wrong, but it's not completely, it's a bit exaggerated, okay? Because it's not always the same features that we see in someone who's sleep deprived compared to someone who's drunk. But cognitive performance wise, Dawson and Reid said it is similar and we can compare the two there. Okay, so that's what they said. And this actually brought up many implications and many changes in policy that we're going to look at in the next slide. But first of all, this is the conclusion that can be drawn from their study. Their study showed that the impact of moderate sleep deprivation was that it could affect a person's ability to complete tasks to a safe and acceptable standard. Okay, now Dawson and Reid, when they first published these results, it was obviously quite dramatic. Okay, people were like, you know what, that's a big statement to make. Being tired can be like being drunk. Are you sure about this? So obviously they were like, you know what, let's do a follow-up study. So they did another study and they found that their results were consistent with the first study. So then that increased the kind of reliability of their results there. Okay, so that's the basic method. You don't need to know anything further than this. It's just about knowing these are the main points there, how it was conducted. Okay, so just looking at the results, these are just some more graphical kind of representations of the results there. So you can see here that when you're sleep deprived for 17 hours, okay, your performance, this is cognitive performance at the equivalent blood alcohol level. Your cognitive performance, which is represented by this black kind of dot here, is equivalent to someone with a BAC, and this is halfway between 0.04 and 0.05. So your cognitive performance will resemble someone who has a BAC level of 0.05, okay? And we can see on the opposite end, if you're sleep deprived for 24 hours, your decline in performance on a cognitive or psychomotor task, so on a cognitive like quiz or a psychomotor task like driving, will be similar to that of a person who's consumed enough alcohol to reach 0.10. And we can map that out here as well. So if you go 24 hours and you bring that up, okay, the black dot representing cognitive performance, that 0.1 matches up there. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So I've given you that rule again here. 17 hours of sleep deprivation is similar to being, you'll have similar cognitive performance to someone who's consumed enough alcohol to reach a 0.05% BAC. Okay, and remember guys, BAC just means blood alcohol concentration. It's how much concentration of alcohol substance you have in your blood after consuming a few drinks, okay? And again, that depends on the actual alcohol content of what you've consumed. So 24 hours on the other hand, if I'm sleep deprived for 24 hours, my cognitive performance or cognitive decline on a task will be similar to someone who's consumed enough alcohol to go twice the legal limit. That means 0.05 times 2, twice that is going to be 0.10. Okay. Now you can see how concerning this would be for, you know, for the world around us, okay, for people in society. TAC got onto this straight away. TAC is our Transport Accident Commission. They're the people that make up those slogans of, have a 15-minute power nap. If you drink and drive, you're a bloody idiot. All those campaigns are from them. They're basically the board in charge of preventing motor accidents, ensuring road safety and all that stuff. Okay, so if we look at the implications of our results for the real world, what this study really tells us is that sleep deprivation is not just about you not having enough sleep and feeling tired, but it can actually affect your performance in tasks as well. Cognitive tasks, for example, if you're sleep deprived when you go to school to do a SAC, you're not going to do as well as you might have normally done. Okay. And more importantly, and probably more life-threateningly, it can affect your ability to do psychomotor tasks. So if you're someone who's sleep deprived and your main job is to operate heavy machinery, okay, you could actually harm yourself or harm others because you don't have the proper or normal motor functioning, okay, combined with your cognitive functioning that you have to operate that thing in a safe manner. Okay, if we're going to link it to a more general skill like driving is a psychomotor task. Remember I said that it requires you to use your brain for things like reaction time, hazard perception, but it also requires you to be quick with your reflexes. Okay, if someone jumps onto the road or something, you need to be able to brake in time. If your reflexes are off because you're sleep deprived, you are going to have issues. Okay, and you're more likely to get into a crash because of that. Now, everyone knew this in a common sense kind of way, like obviously I'm not going to get behind the wheel when I'm sleepy, but no one really understood that being sleep deprived could be as bad as being under the influence of alcohol for your driving. So TAC jumped onto this straight away, and they made this whole campaign, that basically indicated the importance of not drinking and driving. Okay, and indicating that this is as bad as being sleep deprived. Okay, and they obviously also became more stronger in their campaigns about power naps and having enough sleep. Okay, so a 15-minute power nap could save your life. That's a really important one to show that they're focusing now not just on sleep deprivation, but also on alcohol consumption as well. Okay, and vice versa. So not just on alcohol consumption, but also on the importance of being or having enough sleep there. Okay, and remember guys, this study was completed in 1997. A lot of these TAC campaigns of, a 15-minute power nap could save your life, all those billboards that they were putting up on the major highways and major freeways and stuff there, came up after 1997. This campaign of the 15-minute power nap can save your life was very big in the early 2000s. Okay, this is when it first kind of started off, and TAC was motivated by the results of Dawson and Reid study to make campaigns like this. They didn't just focus on drinking and driving, but also focused on the importance of a power nap. The fact that drinking and driving is bad for your drinking alcohol and then driving can cause you to crash, but so can not having enough sleep. Okay, and that's the basic idea of the Dawson and Reid study as a whole. Okay. So hopefully, guys, that makes a little bit of sense. This study is not a complicated one, but it's just important for you to remember those numbers, okay? 17 hours corresponds to 0.05 blood alcohol concentration level. 24 hours of sleep deprivation corresponds to twice that, which is 0.1% or 0.10% there, okay? That's the basic idea. If we ask you a question on this, we're only going to ask you a question on something like link it to consciousness or something like that, okay, or link it to concentration. So that's all given to you on this slide here. All you need to be able to do is link the results of that study to how it affects the cognition. So you could say they have impaired thought processes, they're not able to make decisions properly, they're not able to problem solve, okay? With concentration, you can talk about not having a proper attention span, okay, making it more difficult to concentrate. Think about yourself when you've been sleep deprived for quite a number of hours, maybe not 17 hours, but even close to that. You have issues with attention, you have issues with concentrating, okay, you have issues with focusing on a task, which is what selective attention is, and also sleep deprivation and mood. So when we talk about mood, we talk about the affective effects. So this is talking about the affective effects. Concentration is obviously a cognitive effect, and cognition again is a cognitive effect as well. Okay, so just basically memorize this little picture here on this slide, and you'll be all good for the SAC. Okay, we can't ask you for anything other than the effect of that study on cognition, concentration, or mood. Okay, that's what the study design also indicates there. Okay, this is just an extra slide or table taken from your PowerPoint, we can ask you about these as well, but it's just about linking the two topics. So if we ask you, for example, how would the participants in Dawson and Reid study have impaired self-control, you could talk about the fact that they weren't able to, control their physical behaviors as much. So if someone was jumping in front of them on the road, or there was an obstacle in front of the car when they were driving in the experiment, they might not have been able to, move their foot to the brake as quickly as they would have in a normal situation where they were not sleep deprived. Okay, so that's the basic idea there, guys. So just go through that table. And it's probably more important for you guys to know this one though. Okay, so this is the most important one. This is more for like linking the topic. So linking this topic to the previous topic there. Okay, guys, so that's it for the contents. I'm just going to stop the recording